Okay guys, welcome back again. This is going to be our pie demo video. I hope you enjoyed the fun fry video. It took me a little bit longer to get up online as expected, but it's a big learning curve, right? We're all learning these online systems. So today I'm going to show you a couple different pie makeups, techniques, ways to make it look pretty simple. Very, very simple though. I'm not trying to go too crazy into anything today, okay? We're going to be looking at our cooked pies and we're going to be looking at our uncooked pies. We call them our baked pies or our unbaked pies. You need to realize that there are certain pies that do go in the oven, meaning the full pie. The dough is raw, the ingredients in the filling might be somewhat raw. They all need to go in the oven together, baked, or you have unbaked pies. That's where you're fully baking a pie crust and then you're putting in a cold filling. Now, when we do take a pie crust like this one, with nothing in it, and we bake it, it is called blind baking. A lot of times you'll hear in this industry, I need you to blind bake me some pie shells. That means we need these fully baked off, fully cooked, but with nothing in it, so that we can then fill it with other cold ingredients, cold fillings that are considered the unbaked pie world. So you have to know what kind of pie you're making from the get-go so that you understand the steps that go involved in it. If I'm using a cookie crumb crust, but I'm doing an unbaked pie, do I need to toast it first? Do I not need to toast it? Blind bake it? Do I need to blind bake it first or do I not? That's something that you need to figure out before you get started in this task, okay? For today, I'm not going to actually make a pie crust from scratch for one very simple reason. It is so easy. Pie crust is essentially the biscuit method. Very similar. There isn't any egg content. There's not a whole lot of water content. It's meant to be just butter broken up into flour, dry ingredients, and then small amounts of moisture added in to make it pliable. Really not a whole lot of kneading into it. You're not really trying to create a whole lot of gluten. Once again, like the biscuits, the flakiness or the mealiness is dictated by how much you break the butter into the dry ingredients. Break up the butter. So if you want a flakier pie crust, you're going to leave those butter chunks as you're breaking them up larger. If you want it more of a mealy pie crust, you'll make it a little bit smaller. And the book kind of tells you some suggestions of when you should use mealy pie dough, when you should use flaky. It's really kind of a choose your own adventure. I've done both types of pie doughs with a bunch of different types of fillings and they usually work out pretty well. Realizing the pie dough is different from our cookie crumb crust, okay? So I'm going to talk about that in a second once we get over to it, but I just want to show you today, I'm not actually going to be making the pie crusts. I'm going to show you how to set them up and build them with puff pastry. This is actually puff pastry already made. What is puff pastry? It's that laminated dough, right? It's technically not used a lot for pies, but it's such a light, fluffy, flaky pastry dough anyway. I've used it for pies a million times and they always come out looking beautiful. And I'll show you one that I did today with just puff pastry. But typically you're gonna use pie dough for both the top crust and the bottom. For today, I'm just showing you how to do the makeup. You would still make the pie dough exactly like the recipe in the book, okay? So first, I'm gonna make the filling because we need to cool it down before it gets into the pie crust. Anytime you're doing a hot pie filling, you need to cool it down before it gets into the crust, okay? So we are going to make the fresh apple pie filling one in your book. There's a few apple pie recipes in your book and you need to understand there's a couple different methods that go along with these fruit pies, okay? The fruit pies are typically considered baked pies. Even if you are cooking the fruit filling first, it's still supposed to go in a raw pie crust into the oven and fully cook the rest of the way, okay? But there are two methods that you usually use with those fruit pies, okay? You've got the cooked fruit method and you've got the cooked juice method. Now, essentially, these are still the same kind of concept. You're trying to get a cooked fruit in a thick, sugary syrup, okay? Now, if you have different ingredients, that's what's really gonna dictate whether you choose the cooked fruit or the cooked juice method. Hearing cooked juice method, you're instantly thinking juice, right? So I'm probably using something with a high water content and thickening all that delicious juice to make it a syrup to then make it become the pie filling, right? Well, what usually has a high water content? Those are gonna be those fruits that maybe have a higher water content, or typically what's used for the cooked juice method pies is canned fruit. What is canned fruit? Canned fruit and vegetables typically are cooked. They're cooked products. They'll usually blanch the veggies or fruits slightly so that they are not completely raw, they're slightly cooked, and then they're gonna pack them. Sometimes they solid pack them. Solid packed fruit means it's just solid fruit in that can. Sometimes it'll be syrup packed. So now there's all this delicious fruit syrup in there with the fruit to keep it as a keeping product. The word that I'm always losing, right? Fermentation, not really fermentation. Anyway, you know how I'm with words. You will have also a packed in water. And now that's gonna be more of a water juice of the fruit and not a high sugar content. It's not gonna be syrupy, it's gonna be more liquid. Whenever you have those canned fruits with a high syrup or liquid packed in juice or syrup, that's typically what you're gonna use the cooked juice method for, because you're taking all that delicious syrup and fruit juice and you're thickening that with the fruit inside of it to make a thick pie filling. If I'm doing fresh fruit though, and especially if I'm doing a fresh fruit with a low water content, I need to come up and make up for that loss of syrup. I need to have some kind of a syrupy filling, right? So we're gonna do the cooked fruit method, and that's where we're cooking down, sauteing the fruits, getting the water to come out of them, the juices to come out of them, thickening those juices, and then using that to create the pie filling. And then that's what we'll cool down and put into our pie shell, okay? So if you look at your fresh apple pie recipe, I have the mise en place all ready to go. I've got my apples right here. I've got some butter and sugar. I'm gonna go ahead and get them into the pan. And we're gonna get them started sauteing up. Make sure you guys can still see me. Beautiful. Okay, so sauteing anytime. Usually we're putting our fat in first, right? We need some kind of a fat so that it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan. It caramelizes correctly. If you don't have a fat bottom of the pan, you are having your sugars caramelize usually too quickly. A burning can happen, whereas that fat is going to aid in the Maillard reaction, right? The Maillard reaction, the caramelizing effect. So I got my pan up pretty hot right now. Butter's almost completely melted. I'm gonna go ahead and drop my apples in. I'm running quick today. We're gonna knock all these out real quick. So we're gonna start sauteing these apples. We should start to see shrinkage because the water is evaporating. It is getting sucked out of the apples. It's cooling in the pan. The apples should be slightly crunchy still, but tender. They're gonna cook the rest of the way in the oven, but we wanna make sure that we get some of that water content out, and we wanna slightly blanch them a little bit, just so that they are crunchy yet tender. And I'm probably gonna end up doing two things at once just because I really hate sitting here bored. So, while that's kind of cooking in the background, I am going to show you how to make a cookie crumb crust, okay? Cookie crumb crusts, not always, but 9 times out of 10 are used for those unbaked pies because they come together really easy, really quick. They can be blind baked really, really quick, and they have a higher sugar content, so they are more palatable with those unbaked pies. Some key lime pies, not all key lime pies are unbaked, but then you're gonna see your chiffon pies, your cream pies, vanilla cream pie, banana cream pie. All those pies are unbaked pies, so you should see those typically in a cookie crumb crust. What is a cookie crumb crust? Well, it's in the name, right? Cookie crumb. So you can use graham cracker crumbs, but you can also use whatever kind of cookie crumbs you want. We do suggest using a really dry, brittle cookie so that it crumbles correctly. And then you still, 9 times out of 10, you're still doing the same concoction. So you have your cookie crumbs, you have an amount of sugar, and then you add in melted butter as a thickening agent, essentially, to bring it all together. It helps it stick. So you can see here I have cookie crumbs, some sugar. I'm just going to toss those, bring them all together into one big concoction, and then I can start adding my melted butter. There's a recipe for this in your book, but a lot of chefs don't ever use a recipe. You can eyeball it very simply. Sugar, graham cracker crumbs, melted butter. What we are looking for is that the crust will come together. So right now you can see nothing, right? Powder. When I start putting the melted butter in, it will start to clump and hold in my hand. When it does clump fully and holds its shape, we know it's ready to go. Add my sugar in here and just keep sauteing these bad boys up. That's the first amount of butter, the first amount of sugar, and the 2 pounds of apples for that recipe. We're We're just gonna keep cooking those bad boys up. They look delicious. All right, I already have some melted butter right here in the back of the stove, so I'm gonna slowly start adding this in till it, like I said, comes together and clumps up, right? A little bit of butter, add that in, and just kind of toss that butter around into your cookie crumb crust, okay? You can already see it comes together very, very quickly. But I like to keep a lot of melted butter off to the side. You never know. If you need a little bit more, you don't want to have to scramble and go get more butter. This thing keeps hitting me in the head. This is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Okay, right there, it's pretty much coming together. It broke just a little bit, so I might add just a little bit more butter to it, and then we should be ready to go. Cookie crumb crust. Boom. Pretty solid. It's pretty solid. I got that nice big piece right there. Perfect. So I know that's ready to go. I can start to put it into my pie crust. Pie tin. Pie tin. This is my pie crust. I'm gonna get this so you guys can see what I'm doing. You can see right now my apples are becoming translucent. Some of them are still a little opaque, a little white. The juice is starting to come out and they're starting to get tender, which is what I want. So I'm gonna let them go just a little bit longer. Boom. Okay, now we got this cookie crumb crust ready to go. We're gonna go ahead and start putting it into our pie tin. Putting it into our pie tin. It's clumping together, it's clumping pretty well, so you know it should be pretty solid and it will set up nicely in this pie tin. First, we're gonna start putting a decent layer on the bottom there. Make sure that you have enough to cover the bottom fully, but you don't want it too thick. The main attraction is not the crust, right? It's the filling. The crust is just to hold it in shape. So you don't want too much crust. Once I start to get it on the bottom level like that, then I usually use a tool, something with a flat bottom, literally anything. And then I use this to just press my crust into place. Now, this is kind of style. Do you want just a bottom crust or do you want a side crust on your cookie crumb crust pie crust? It's a little bit more difficult to put a side rim with a cookie crumb crust than it is a normal pie dough, but if you want to, then essentially all you have to do is get all that crust on the edges there and press it until it holds its shape. I will tell you, doing these by hand with side crusts can be a pain in the ass. I will 9 times out of 10 buy them pre-made so that I don't have to worry about the edges. But if you want an edge on your crusts, that's how you do it. That's pretty much almost done, so I'm turning the heat down back there so I can finish this up real quick. And then you use your tool again to just kind of press this side crust so it holds into the pan. Now, whenever I do fresh cookie crumb crusts, I always toast them just so that they hold their shape. If I buy a cookie crumb crust, it's usually set pretty well in its pie tin, so you don't have to worry about that. But anytime I do a fresh cookie crumb crust, say for a cheesecake, for a pie, for whatever, I'm gonna toast it just a little bit, 375 to about 400, just so that it holds its shape. No more than 10 minutes. Usually 10 minutes, it'll burn. So it's like somewhere between 5 to 7 minutes. And you'll have a really nice cookie crumb crust. So now I got that ready to go. I'm gonna pop in the oven for a couple minutes, let that toast off. Boom. Now, we have our apples pretty much ready to go. We're gonna go ahead and finish this recipe off real quick. So if you're looking at your recipe, you'll see butter, sugar, and apples. We're supposed to be sauteing first until light and soft. Then we're adding in our cornstarch and water. Now, if you know anything about cornstarch and water, adding cornstarch directly to a hot liquid, virtually impossible. It'll clump up. What you're supposed to do is create what's called a slurry. And that's how we're thickening all these pie fillings for the fruit methods, the cooked juice or the cooked fruit method. They're typically thickened with cornstarch, but you can't take cornstarch, put it into something hot. You have to put it into cold liquid first, stir it up until it creates that nice smooth slurry, and then you can add it into your hot ingredients. So that's what we're gonna do. Once you get it there, the cornstarch doesn't thicken until it reaches boiling temperature, right? So if I know it's cold now and it's going into this pan, it's probably gonna have to go back to the heat, just like pastry cream, to thicken it, okay? So boom, into the pan, and we're gonna put it back on the heat. And this in the recipe says until it is clear and thick. The cornstarch will turn clear once it comes up to that temperature, and it will thicken the juices that are already in the pan to form a nice apple pie filling. And you can see right now I have such a big pan and such a small amount of cornstarch and water to apples. It's going to take like 2 seconds. So after that, it says to go ahead and add everything else into the pan and just let it fully dissolve and come together, and you're done. That is it. It's already starting to thicken up. If you're not seeing enough liquid, you can always add a little bit. Just a little bit. Bring all that together so it's nice, hot, clear, and it thickens. Now I'm going to add everything else. Boom. There we go. Just till the sugar is dissolved, and you should have a really nice pie filling. We're pretty much ready to go. I'll show you guys what we're looking at here. It's nothing crazy. It looks a lot like that apple pie filling that I was using for those apple fritters yesterday. You could use that same concoction to make a decent apple pie, but this is the set standard recipe, and it does make a really excellent product. So now that we got that fully cooked, I'm going to throw it in the fridge to kind of help it cool down a little bit, and we're going to jump to the next task. So the next task, while that's cooling down, my cookie crumb crust is toasting real quick. I'm going to show you how to put together the pie crust in a pie tin, and we'll get that ready to go. Real quick, first question for this assignment. After watching the video, make sure you answer this question. First question. If I'm doing a fresh strawberry pie, what method do you think I would be using? If I'm doing a fresh strawberry pie, what method do you think I will be using? Okay. I forgot one pie tin. Let me grab that real quick. All right. These are a fantastic product. I love the aluminum foil disposable pie tins. If it's easy cleanup, easy to make and form into the pan. I've used metal before. They're not a bad product, but guess what? You got to clean them now, right? And glass, I hate glass pie tins. A lot of people will use them in the industry, especially when we have metal tables. These are wood, but metal tables out there, you pull a hot pie out of the oven, you put that hot glass on cold metal, cracks it every single time. I've gone through so many glass pie tins, and they all end up getting thrown away with the pie. So I do suggest these great aluminum foil pie tins. Works great every single time. So once again, I did not make my own pie crust. I wasn't showing you guys how to do that. It's really, really simple. I just want to show you the makeup. So essentially you would do a similar biscuit method, breaking up that butter, creating the dough. We usually chill it for a few minutes, and then we bring it out and we roll it out relatively thin like a pie crust. So you would be going to about this thickness right here, rolling it out into a relatively big shape, and then you'll be able to start setting up your pie tin. I suggest you lay your pie tin down over onto your thinly rolled out pie dough and you use a paring knife. Now, you should cut your pie crust to a larger circle than your pie tin. So if my pie tin's sitting right here, I'm gonna give it a little bit of an edge. So you can see I leave a little lip so I can account for the edges of the pie crust, the pie tin, pie crust too, either way, but. Boom. So you can see there, I went a little bit bigger than the tin, okay? So now we can go ahead and flip this bad boy over and get this crust into here. Boom. Remember, this is puff pastry that I'm using here, and it works really, really well. So we want to go ahead and start sitting that down into the pie tin and laying that crust gently over the sides. Boom, boom, boom. Beautiful. Now if I'm doing a lattice crust, I won't trim the edges right now. I'll trim them after I do the lattice, which is what I'm showing you. If I was trying to do a bunch of different toppings or a streusel crumb topping, I would probably trim this pie crust up to the pan right now. But since I'm doing a lattice, I'm not going to worry about it. Anytime you do a pie crust, real pie dough, not cookie crumb crust, whether it's being blind baked or it is a fully unbaked pie that needs to go into the oven, not to confuse you, realizing unbaked pies are the ones that the crust gets fully blind baked first and you put in a cold filling in, okay? The baked pies are the ones that are supposed to be cooked further in the pie dough with a more of a raw filling, okay? But what I'm trying to explain right now is if you're using this for an unbaked pie with that cold filling that needs to go in afterwards and you need to blind bake it, you're gonna dock it so that it fully blind bakes correctly. If you are trying to do a raw apple pie where I'm gonna put this apple pie filling in here now, cover it up and then bake it, I'm still gonna dock the bottom. The docking the bottom helps make sure that that bottom crust is fully cooked all the way through. That's one thing you don't want, to cut through a nice slice of apple pie and you get that raw pie dough underneath, okay? So we always dock the pie crust. Now, if you are trying to blind bake this pie crust, you can see here, graham cracker crust doesn't really rise up, but this will rise up. So you want to weigh down your pie dough if you're blind baking it. If I'm putting it in the oven just like this, I want to put something in there to weigh it down. Whether you're using beans, whether you're using another pan, whether you're using some kind of a metal weight, plastic wrap, and then put the other things down in there, but wait to hold the pie crust down so it doesn't bubble up and pop up in the center. That way you have the most room to put all your filling inside, okay? But we're gonna dock that crust just like that, and then we're going to set up a lattice pie crust. And the pie filling that I fully cooked is still cooling down a little bit, so I'm gonna use this pre-made apple pie filling for you guys. I'm still gonna use that filling into a different pie, but I'm gonna, for right now, for time purposes, we're just gonna go ahead and use this pre-made apple pie filling out of the can. Relatively simple too. And I should probably be using a rubber spatula, but I don't need to. Working pretty well. Generous amounts of pie filling. You don't want too much, it starts mounting up a little bit, but a generous amount of pie filling there, because that's, once again, the main attraction, right? That's what we want to eat. Okay, once again, I have a sheet of puff pastry right here, and that's what I'm going to use to do the top lattice. What does a lattice pie crust mean? Lattice pie crust is that basket weaved topping on top of a signature apple pie, right? So, off the top of your head, you know already you're probably gonna need strips of dough. Strips of dough to then lay over the apple pie. I like to do a simple 4x4 lattice. Don't go too crazy. I don't think it's too simple, but it's not too complicated. It's right in the middle. It makes a nice, standard, beautiful apple pie. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna trim it up just a little bit. It got a little dry on the edge here. And I'm gonna start to slice it into even strips. And if I said I was doing a 4x4 lattice, that means I'm probably gonna need a total of 8 strips. So I'm gonna go ahead and get those knocked out real quick. Boom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I might just do one more, just for good luck. Okay, so now I'm gonna start taking my strips and laying it over my pie to create that interwoven basket-like topping. And I said 4x4, right? So I'm gonna do 4 strips that direction, and then I'm gonna now alternate back the other direction. The way that I do it, I turn my pie that way, and I start from one end. Take 2 of your strips from the other lines, the other 4 lines, pull them back just a little bit, and lay this first strip down on the end here. Bring your 2 other strips back down, and now bring your other 2 strips over this way, because you're alternating, right? Lay another lattice strip down, put these 2 strips back. Grab these other ones, lay them over, put another strip of lattice down, and just keep checking yourself, making sure that your pattern is alternating. Relatively simple, not too crazy. Here's my last strip, and boom. Now I've got my full lattice ready to go. Remember what I was saying about not trimming the pie dough yet because I'm going to create the lattice? So now is when I trim that up, because I seal the lattice to that bottom crust. And then I'm going to trim it, because I'm going to trim that lattice off too anyway. So you grab your paring knife, run around that pie crust, that pie tin real quick, trim off any excess crust. And look at that. It's already coming up pretty nicely. Boom. Boom. Beautiful. Look at that. So once I set that up, these are the last 2 touches that I always like to put on my apple pie. They make them look beautiful and pristine every single time. It's egg wash, turbinado sugar, and done. Throw it in the oven. My camera's still rocking. My phone didn't die yet. Fantastic. Okay, so I got some egg wash right here. Cover the entire lattice. That's the beautiful part, that time-consuming lattice crust that you just made. So that's what you want to showcase now. Egg wash the entire lattice crust. Boom. And you're ready to go with your turbinado sugar. And be generous. Stuff is not only delicious, but it looks great once it caramelizes on top of that apple pie. So don't be afraid to use tons of this stuff. Not too much. Don't go crazy wild, okay? Don't pull a Lexi, but just make sure you coat evenly in the turbinado sugar. And then boom, just like that, we're gonna put it in the oven. I'm gonna pull an Emerald Lagasse, and boom. Here how it comes out of the oven looking. Now, I bake my pies for a very, very long amount of time. I hate undercooked crust when the bottom pie dough is still raw, so I will bake them for a very long amount of time. I just watch the tops. The top is the beautiful part, right? You don't want it to overcook, you don't want it to burn. So if it's starting to get close, aluminum foil, let it hang out in there, turn your oven down a little bit, but make sure that it was in there long enough for the bottom crust to cook fully. I'll go sometimes an hour and a half on a pie if I have to. If the top is not burning, aluminum foil, put it back in the oven, okay? Now, do you have to put a top crust on a pie? No. The old tradition of pie making was the pie crust was supposed to hold in on the ingredients, hold in the heat and the steam as well, so that it fully cooks everything, like those old meat pies and things like that, because they couldn't be eaten. Sorry, not cooked. They couldn't be eaten raw, right? Nowadays, the top crust more for anything is a show. So top crust is optional. You do not have to do a top crust. There is something else in this industry that's used on the tops of pies a lot more for 2 reasons. One, it is beautiful and delicious just as much as a lattice crust. But the biggest reason, the second reason, is it's really easy, not time consuming, and not labor intensive at all. And it is called streusel crumb topping. So if you've ever wondered why Detweiler's always uses a delicious streusel crumb topping, part of it is their tradition. Streusel crumb topping is huge in the Dutch community, the Amish community, but for the even bigger reason, labor and time. It is very, very simple and easy to make large batches of streusel and top pies with streusel than it is to make a lot of pie dough and make lattice tops on all your pies. And you'll see here, I went ahead and made the streusel crumb topping recipe, the same one we used for the crumb cakes and all that stuff. Made that in the book. I add oats and nuts to it because I like more texture, and then go ahead and top your pie with it. And you can top the entire crust if you want. I'm gonna try right here to leave a little hole in the center to make it look prettier. Just get a big high rim on the outside there. And you can see, a lattice crust took me an extra 2 to 3 minutes, right? How quickly was it to be able to put together a pie like that? And I could knock out tons and tons of pies if I was doing streusel crumb topping all day. A great product, still an amazing appearance, labor, time. Always be looking for ways to get around things that are taking too long. See? Save yourself money any way that you can. Okay, real quick for the last task, I'm going to throw together a real quick and simple key lime pie. It is the recipe out of the book, nothing crazy. So if you have time, grab your book, open to the key lime pie filling page, and then you can see the recipe that I'm doing right now. The recipe is 3 ingredients. I will sometimes add 4 if I have fresh limes, lime zest, right? Anytime you're using juice, add the zest into there. Otherwise though, it is 3 ingredients. It's 14 ounces, which is 1 can of sweetened condensed milk. It's 2.67 ounces of egg yolks, which acts as the thickening agent, the solidifying agent, the agent that is going to set up as a custard base so that our pie sets up correctly. 2.67. Boom. And then your juice, your fruit juice. Now, do you have to use lime juice? No. My lemon meringue pie recipe is just my key lime pie recipe with lemon juice and lemon zest. It makes the same thickened custard base for pies. The only difference is you're going to be doing a meringue topping, whereas a key lime pie, you're going to be adding a whipped cream topping, right? So now our 5 ounces of our juice. And then you're done. Go ahead and stir it up and you have a delicious key lime pie filling. Now, I said before, key lime pies are sometimes baked and sometimes unbaked pies. We already talked about what that means, and here's the reason behind it. Just like making buttermilk, your lemon juice is going to curdle your milk, whatever product it is. Milk, cream. This is a sweetened condensed milk, but it is still milk, right? So that citrus is going to start curdling this milk product, this dairy product. Because of the high citric acid content from the juice and the smaller amount of milk content in this pie filling, the recipe technically will set in the fridge. You do not have to bake it. It can be technically an unbaked pie. Once again, style. I've had a lot more success with this recipe if I just slightly bake it at a 375 temperature for about 10 to 20 minutes max, till you get some light bubbles on top and it just helps it set in place. That's my suggestion, but technically it can be an unbaked pie as well. You'll see a ton of variations, okay? But 9 times out of 10, key lime pie, graham cracker crust, that's the two that go together perfectly. So if you've toasted off that crust, you've made your filling, boom, go ahead and fill that pie. Fill that pie up. Beautiful. I'm gonna go ahead and pop this bad boy in the oven. 15 to 20 minutes, not a whole lot of time. Now I will say, something that I specifically do with pies, cheesecake's in the mix too, but really with pies, I like to not only bake, I like to fully cool, and then I like to freeze the pie before I even slice it. If you have a pie fully frozen, pop it out of the pie tin, which is usually very easy. It's a lot simpler to slice cleanly, a lot like the cheesecake that you saw, than say a cake that you can slice thawed. Pies, in my opinion, work a lot better if you let them set up in the freezer, pull them out frozen, and then start to slice them up. Now my key lime pie just went in the oven, right? But I went ahead and made off some key lime pies minis already done, so I could show you a couple ways of putting whipped cream on a pie. Think of this as a large key lime pie though, right? It's small, I realize that, but imagine it's large. Okay, so that's why I got a smaller piping tip on here to kind of give you an idea. If I'm doing a key lime pie, each slice might get a little dollop on it, right? But if I'm trying to keep that pie whole, well then I'll maybe put a big rosette in the center. If I have a decent whipped cream, which this isn't, but in a nice star tip, I can try to do a light swirl around the edges. This can be done with whipped cream on a key lime pie. This can be done with meringue on a lemon meringue pie. It could be done once again with whipped cream on an apple pie. I could deck out that apple pie, but it already such a nice lattice crust. I don't want to destroy that appearance. I could sit here and do cute little dollops around the edge of the key lime pie. But just like anything else that we do in here, right, you can do whatever you want. Whipped cream though, key lime pie is usually a standard. Meringue, toasted meringue, right? The proper way to eat meringue is standard with the lemon meringue pie, okay? For your last question for these assignments, the last question is two questions. I apologize. The last two questions. Question number 2 is key lime pie an unbaked pie or a baked pie, and why? Question number 2 is key lime pie an unbaked pie or a baked pie, and why? Okay? And then the third question, if I'm making a coconut cream pie, is a coconut cream pie baked or unbaked? Is a coconut cream pie baked or unbaked? And then I'll even give you an extra credit one. Which do you think, what type of crust would you put the coconut cream pie in? Just a fun extra credit question, okay? I hope you guys learned something here. I had fun, and I'll see you again on the next video, okay?